So I've been asked, how can sustainability initiatives help mitigate the climate crisis? Well, my controversial opinion is I don't think they can. And the reason for this is that most sustainability approaches are very siloed and fragmented. So just a couple of weeks ago, the latest AR6 report came out from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And this report recognises the interdependence of climate, ecosystems and biodiversity, human societies, the value of diverse forms of knowledge, and the close linkages between climate change adaptation, mitigation, ecosystem health, human well-being, and sustainable development. And it reflects the increasing diversity of actors involved in climate action. Yet, knowing all of this complexity and interconnectivity and interdependence, there are currently no sustainability models that can deal effectively with this nature of living systems. So the very nature of sustainable thinking was born of a mechanistic problem and solution type way of thinking, which fails to adequately deal with the dynamic nature of life. And regeneration is the only model that I've come across in my 25 years of working where I felt like the framework of understanding of living systems is powerful enough to actually work with them. And we've been working with sustainability models since 1987. When the term was coined, yet we've seen increases in global warming since the IPCC's last AR5 report, which covered the period of 2003 to 2012. But since then, in the AR6, we've seen that global warming has increased between 2010 and 2019 by 1.06 degrees. And this is supported by the findings of that report that in 2019, the emissions reductions were less than the increases due to rising global activity. And this is largely due to industry, energy, transport, agriculture, and buildings. Our development models for nations and regions are not supportive of mitigation of the climate crisis. The AR6 acknowledges that there's been some progress in adaptation planning and implementation, generating multiple benefits. However, most observed adaptation responses are indeed fragmented, incremental, sector-specific, and unequally distributed across regions. And that adaptation gaps exist and will continue to grow under the current levels of implementation. So even with all of the COP26 commitments that happened recently, we need a methodology for design and implementation and funding, which de-silos efforts. And this is where regeneration steps in. So the reason for barriers to effective adaptation resulting in efforts that reduce climate-related risk, that's what we mean when we say effective, it's that those efforts actually reduce climate-related risk, include limited resources, lack of private sector and citizen engagement, insufficient mobilisation of financing, including for research, low literacy in terms of understanding climate, lack of political commitment and limited research and slow uptake of adaptation science. And most importantly, a low sense of urgency. And this is largely because we view risk and return in fragmented ways also. So when we study economics, we learn about the risk and return trade-off, and it's viewed as linear. But risk is not linear, it's dynamic. An example of this is, let's say an agricultural business is being assessed and valued by a bank. The assessors look at past performance and past impacts. And then that's what they project into the future. But when you have more dynamic and complex risk factors such as climate change, conventional ways of viewing risk just don't work. So a few years ago, one of my companies designed an app that we worked in collaboration with the former chairman of the IPCC. And we used a number of databases, which were reliable databases for predictive climate data. And we used the app to develop predictive models of risk for banks. And we used an agricultural asset as a winery. So we selected a random one in California, a random one in Italy, and we looked at the risk based on predictive data. Now, at that time, we presented that to some of the top banks in Germany, and the response was, we love this, but we're just not willing to change our business model. And my response to them was, give it a few years, boys. And in fact, now we're seeing that come true because we have everybody jumping onto and scrambling for the next bit of AI and predictive data. But even with all of that type of movement in technology now, we still have banks, VCs, investors unwilling to change their business models. And the impact of that is that money flows from the conventional paradigm. So it means that at best, our sustainability initiatives can be piecemeal in this attempt to mitigate the climate crisis. You know, I have lots of people say we're investing in climate tech, or we're investing clean tech, or we're investing this. That's a very, very traditional VC model. And that piecemeal approach to solving problems and solutions has been proven now by the science of the AR6 report to be ineffective. So because we don't have that sufficient framework for a funding flow in an integrated way into integrated and dynamic investing, that's why I've designed a regenerative investment model, which works with a whole system, with understanding wholes, whole places, whole systems, and allows investments into regenerative assets towards creating a new pattern between risk and return, whereby the more that is invested, the greater the downside risk of climate decreases.